What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my Friday Night SmackDown audio review for January 12th, 2024. I am Graham G. Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well and having a great weekend so far. Not as strong of a show as last week with the returns that we got last week, the debuts, the title match, the big main event, and everything else, the hot crowd. The crowd on this show wasn't bad, not to say that was a factor, but just not as eventful of an episode. Kind of felt like a filler show coming off of last week's newsworthy night from the Blue Brand that really set the tone, I thought, for what should be a big 2024 for the Blue Brand in 2024. But I thought this was a solid show for what it was. Opening the episode, we had Grayson Waller versus Cameron Grimes, or what was supposed to be Grayson Waller versus Cameron Grimes. You probably should have known from the moment that Waller came out that this was a red flag. I mean, the match was announced last week. This wasn't a random match. Grayson Waller confronted Cameron Grimes backstage last week, or vice versa, rather, and they were supposed to have a match on the show. They have faced off before, but they're just not overly significant on the show right now. Waller is pretty much a regular on SmackDown. He's been feuding with Kevin Owens alongside Austin Theory for the last couple of weeks, months now on SmackDown. This didn't really feel like an overly important match, though. So you kind of had to know that something was going to happen, and sure enough, during Cameron Grimes' entrance, he gets completely ambushed from behind by the Bloodline. Jimmy Uso and Solo Sikoa come out, thrash Cameron Grimes before he can even make it into the ring. Grayson Waller does escape unscathed, so he was not involved in this attack. But Paul Heyman was out there basically to kind of rant about the fact that Roman Reigns has to defend his undisputed WWE Universal Championship in a fatal four-way made by Nick Aldis last week on SmackDown at the Royal Rumble coming up in a few weeks. So they weren't happy about that. Nick Aldis comes out still determined to stick it to the Bloodline. And what I think they've done a really good job of since reintroducing the authority figures on the show is making them out to be not cowards, to make them out to be strong individual authority figures. Because usually in years past, they would be cowards and they would kind of do whatever the heels told them to do. Even Adam Pearce, as recently as a few years ago, was doing that. But they made him into a great authority figure on Raw, and Nick Aldis, and especially a great authority figure on SmackDown. Two great authority figures on their respective shows. So I like that. And I don't know, it kind of feels like we would get a Roman Reigns and Nick Aldis match at some point. Never in my life did I think I would ever say those words. Not that I would not want to see that match, because I would. I don't think that's where this is going. I do think when Nick Aldis does get in the ring at some point, he would benefit from being a heel. And I stick by what I said a few weeks ago. I feel like a Nick Aldis, Randy Orton match, feud, whatever it might be, that we first kind of saw teased over a month ago when Orton signed with SmackDown, and he laid out Nick Aldis kind of out of nowhere with an RKO, made me think that it could be planting the seeds for a Mania match between the two, which could still be possible. I don't think that's where this is going, but it is a possibility. But anyway, so I like that Nick Aldis is kind of taking to the Bloodline, not backing down. Roman Reigns was not on this show, which is what made this subsequent announcement even more significant. He said, listen, if you guys want to fight tonight, you're not going to ruin my main event, because you guys are going to be in the main event. It's going to be Solo Sikoa, Jimmy Uso, and a third partner against Randy Orton, AJ Styles, and LA Knight. So the entire theme of the show, which SmackDown does a pretty good job of as far as creating a recurring theme throughout the show, and Raw does the same thing from time to time as well, as far as what they need to do to get a third partner. So we saw Paul Heyman throughout the show having Pretty Deadly come up to him. He went up to Bobby Lashley, among other people, trying to see who would be a good fit for this spot to team with them on the show. It kind of made me think Roman Reigns was on the show, which he was not advertised. He did not end up showing up, so he was not there. I thought Nick Aldis might make the match to include Paul Heyman, but Paul Heyman was not stepping up to the plate if he didn't have to. So that was the entire theme of the show. We'll get back to that a little bit later on. We had Santos' new stablemates, Angel and Humberto. Now, Santos Escobar is still Santos Escobar. He did not drop his last name. Angel and Humberto did. Now, I know this is nothing new, because the last time they were on SmackDown as Los Lotharios, they were Angel and Humberto. But what's weird to me is that they were just in NXT, and when they went back to NXT, for whatever reason, the rules don't apply to NXT. I mean, I guess they do, because people have had their names changed in NXT. But they went back to NXT as recently as last year, a few months ago, and as recently as like a month or two ago, in NXT, they were being called Angel Garza and Humberto Carrillo. They had their last names. But now that they're back on the main roster, they're back to just being Angel and Humberto. I don't know why. They're not Los Lotharios anymore, which I like. They dropped the whole silly, were like these handsome Latino men making people fall in love with us, which was fine for a time, but it didn't really get them beyond a certain level their last time on the main roster. So I like the fact they dropped that. They look like stars alongside Santos. I love the idea of a faction with these three, kind of like a new Legado del Fantasma. But they came out for a match against the current LWO members, Joaquin, Wilde, and Cruz del Toro. Nice little match here. Santos sat in on commentary. Carlito came through about probably not halfway through, towards the end, and they brawled through the crowd. And that kind of left me thinking maybe we would see an LWO win here. They rarely win on SmackDown, but they did end up actually losing. Angel and Humberto did end up picking up the win here. I thought, the LWO would capitalize off the distraction. Not really. They kind of attempted to. Ultimately, they did come up short. Angel and Humberto going over, picking up the victory here, and continuing to build momentum. So it kind of seems like we're headed towards a six-person tag team match at some point, maybe as early as next week, with Santos, Humberto, and Humberto and Angel, that is. This is why we need the last names back. Angel, Humberto, and Santos Escobar against the LWOs, Wilde, Del Toro, and Carlito. That would make the most sense to me. But I thought this was nice and well wrestled for what it was. The LWO, as far as Wilde and Toro are concerned, on the main roster, they never fucking win. They're actually pulling double duty right now between SmackDown and NXT. It kind of felt like for a while, for a few weeks there, Angel and Humberto switched places with the LWO, but they attacked Angel and Humberto on SmackDown last week, so that's probably not necessarily the case. They're probably just pulling double duty. They're going to be involved in the Men's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic, I think coming up next week, actually. They have a quarterfinal match coming up on Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. So they're actually pulling double duty between the two brands right now, which is perfectly fine. So after that, we had Bianca Belair versus Bayley. Stop me if you've heard this before. And I know you have, because they've had a million matches on SmackDown and Raw and on pay-per-view in the last number of years. I think this is the 5th consecutive year that these two have had a match against each other on TV. Now, I can't think of too many people that have had matches on TV, at least one match, singles match against each other, every year on TV for 5 years straight. There might be a few people, but I know these two are among them, because they first feuded in late 2020 during the pandemic, during the Thunderdome era, when Bayley had to put Bianca, she put her through a bunch of obstacles and she picked up Otis. Remember that whole thing back in late 2020? And that was building to the Royal Rumble. They had a match around that time, not on the TLC pay-per-view, but on SmackDown, where Bayley actually was the first one to hand Bianca a defeat, her first main roster singles televised defeat, and she beat her. They had a rematch a couple of weeks later, right before the Royal Rumble, and that was the theme of this match. They had said coming into this match that the last time Bianca Belair won the Royal Rumble, the last match that she had on SmackDown before winning the Rumble was against Bayley and beating her. And that's what we saw here in the exact same outcome. Bianca has won almost every single one of these matches. But keep that in mind. So they had matches then in late 2020, another match in early 2021. They rekindled the rivalry coming out of WrestleMania that year when Bianca was the SmackDown Women's Champion. They had the match at Backlash for the championship. They had Hell in a Cell match at Hell in a Cell for the championship, Bianca winning both. And they were supposed to have an I Quit match at Extreme Rules before Bayley got hurt. But as soon as Bayley gets hurt and comes back, they rekindle the rivalry again upon her return in 2022, this time over the Raw Women's Championship. So we had matches in 2020, 2021, and now 2022. I think Bayley again beat Bianca on Raw in a singles match, again handing her one of her only defeats ever on WWE TV around that time. But she did end up losing to Bianca at the Extreme Rules show, which I was at, the ladder match back in late 2022. And then again in the Last Woman Standing match at Crown Jewel a few weeks later. So that ended the feud for that period in 2022. They had even more matches last year when Bianca was feuding with Damage Control when she came back to SmackDown. And that's the feud that we're still seeing now. They're still feuding to this day. And Bianca beat her a bunch more times. She beat her before Crown Jewel a few months ago. And now they had another match on this show. And Bianca won once again. So hopefully this is the final time that we see Bianca and Bayley for a very long time. I know I've said that before. And they work well together, don't get me wrong. Bayley sells a great KOD. They have great chemistry. They have quality matches. It's just the fact I feel like I've seen it a million fucking times. In the exact same dynamic, too. It's not like they've had a lot of matches where Bianca's been the babyface and then she turned heel and Bayley was the babyface. Maybe at some point I'd be okay with seeing that. I think Bayley is going babyface pretty soon. Hopefully, fingers crossed. But, at least for the foreseeable future, no more Bianca Bayley matches. That has been done to death. We need to move on with some fresh faces in that division. But I thought this was a well-worked match, a good one for Bianca. The whole story of the match, in addition to what I just said, was also that the Damage Control faction, Bayley's Damage Control buddies, did not help her out at ringside. They were at ringside, but in this match, they didn't help her. She wanted them to. She feigned a knee injury at one point. They were standing right over Bianca's body on the outside, and they just refused to help. Dakota told Bayley afterward, we didn't want to get involved at the risk of being disqualified and having you lose the match that way. Bayley didn't buy it. She wasn't happy, so she doesn't like the fact that she's there for Damage Control, but Damage Control is not there for her. So clearly setting up a split. Bayley's lost a lot of matches. I can't remember too many matches that she's won on TV in the last 6 months or so. But, I think they are headed towards the inevitable babyface turn, and hopefully that does start with a Royal Rumble win in a couple of weeks of the Royal Rumble. She hasn't won a Rumble yet. It makes sense for her to win the Rumble, maybe set her sights on, not Io Sky, well, Io Sky ultimately, but Rhea Ripley over on Raw. Maybe tease that for it. Look, kind of similar to Batista winning the Rumble back in 2005, where he was going to choose JBL, so Triple H could go for Triple H was the World Heavyweight Champion at that point. But then he ended up turning babyface, turning on Evolution, and choosing the World Heavyweight Championship and going after his former mentor, Triple H. Now, Bayley isn't, she's not the protege of Io Sky. She's the mentor to Io Sky. But still, same story prevails, where I think Bayley chooses her stablemate. She goes babyface, does Bayley, and maybe even wins the championship at WrestleMania. But I thought that the story they're telling here is being well done. But I am very much ready to move beyond the Bianca versus Damage Control storyline, because we've been in this same chapter for many, many months now, and Charlotte being out hurt doesn't exactly help, because I thought Bianca would be transitioned into a story with her heading into WrestleMania, and that's not going to happen because Charlotte's out for pretty much most of the year with her injury. We had Bobby Lashley and the Street Profits, or should I say the Pride, out in the ring next. Now, WrestleVotes came out, I think, either on Thursday or on Friday, tweeting that the internal new name for Bobby and the Profits, they've been a group for months, like probably 6 months or so at this point, but now they officially have a new name, and it's The Pride. And I would only go off of, WrestleVotes is usually right. I would say that's just speculation for now. I don't think they called them The Pride on the show. I don't think they call themselves The Pride on the show. Bobby Lashley seemed to confirm they are The Pride by putting The Pride in his Twitter bio. Now, could he be messing with people? Maybe. He doesn't tend to do that pretty often, though. So I would take it for what it's worth. They could be called The Pride going forward. I'm sorry, but that name sucks. That name just does not sound good. It makes it sound like they're fucking like a bunch of lion cubs or something like that. I don't know. Isn't that what you would call like a bunch of lions? And maybe that's the point. I feel like you just had an obvious name, but that's what people are calling a pretty logical stable name, and the Almighty Profits. I don't know about Street Business. That seems pretty basic, although you're merging the Profits with the Hurt Business. The Street Profits with the Hurt Business. That makes sense. I just like the Almighty Profits. I feel like that's also simple, but it sounds better and it's got more oomph to it. The Pride, I guess it's unique. It's not a very good name. Maybe it'll grow on me. I'm sure we won't be talking about this in a week or two anyway, but I just thought I would mention that. So they were out in the ring to address the attack from Karrion Kross and AOP last week. They were interrupted here by Kross and AOP via a vignette that aired on the big screen. Very well produced. A vignette. They didn't come out here. They did not attack Lashley and the Profits. And that was pretty much the end of the segment. Kind of just uttering the same old gibberish that Karrion Kross does. And I can't even really say the words don't matter. Typically they don't. I can't say that they do matter either because he hasn't really done anything to back it up. I know they stood tall over Bobby and the Profits last week. They have to do more to be taken seriously as a threat. Karrion Kross, I just don't have a lot of faith this is going to work ultimately because he hasn't been able to get over so far from losing so many fucking matches that matter. The guy's got a great gimmick, good look, decent enough in the ring. I love the vignettes, but when the bell rings, he doesn't have a lot of special matches, which is fine, but he also isn't really booked to look like a threat to anyone. That's also the problem as well. I hope Bobby and the Profits are different. I feel like they can sustain the loss and it's okay. They're popular enough where they're going to be fine. Bobby's just, infinitely over at this point. He is a perennial main event player that's been pretty much established at this point, where I feel like if he eats a few losses to Karrion and AOP, they have a much better stable name. They pretty much confirmed it here. They are the Final Testament. That is a fucking awesome name. And I'm not sure if noob_n_co TV on hashtag the other day said that name, I thought you had mentioned Dead Silent. Maybe I'm thinking of the name of Karrion's theme song. Maybe you did call them the Final Testament. I'm not sure where. Maybe you got that from Karrion's Twitter. You probably. I got to give props to you. You had mentioned that the other day on hashtag, and I think you mentioned that name, and I said that was a pretty cool name. It is a pretty great faction name, especially being heard out loud by Karrion Kross and having him say it out loud. But I thought this was fine. Kind of furthered the feud. Nothing overly exciting. It just kind of furthered the feud. We got some follow-up. We found out the new name for Karrion and his new, faction mates, whatever. Paul Ellering was the only one to come out, not say anything, but just point to the screen, and that was it. Hopefully at some point we get to hear from him as well. Although he didn't really talk a lot, I feel like, in NXT. I feel like he was just a silent manager where he would just be out there, manage them, and have that be it. So I'm not sure he just adds to the aura of the group. I like the group, but the follow-up is key in making them look like a threat. Because if they can't do that, then they are doomed. Carmelo Hayes was also on the show. He confronted Nick Aldis backstage and kind of, talked about the impressive showing that he had in the United States Championship #1 Contenders Tournament. So it looks like he is headed to SmackDown. I thought that was it for him for the foreseeable future. He's got this ongoing story right now, and they actually promoted it during this match or right before the match started. It was, him and Trick coming up on NXT this coming Tuesday. It's going to be them against Malik Blade and Idris Enofi in the first round of the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic that kicked off this past week on NXT. I don't think they're winning the entire thing. I think Trick is probably still facing Ilya at the Vengeance Day pay-per-view. They haven't confirmed that. I hope they do soon. The show's coming up fairly quickly. But I think that's still the main event for that show for the NXT Championship. So it sounds like he might be pulling double duty because I'm not really sure why they would have him on this show if they did not intend to keep him on SmackDown going forward and have him pull double duty for the foreseeable future. He is obviously main roster material. It's just more a matter of seeing that story through with Trick Williams and making sure they do the match over WrestleMania weekend, which isn't for another 3 months, but maybe they want him on the main roster in the meantime. I would imagine when he turns heel in NXT, he would also turn heel on SmackDown. It would just be weird, I think, to have him as a heel in NXT and then as a babyface on SmackDown. We know they're all the same thing, and people do watch both shows. Not a lot of people, but there is a crossover audience, obviously, between NXT and SmackDown. I doubt a lot of people watch NXT and not SmackDown, is my point. And they have had crossover storylines, so that would just be insulting the intelligence of the audience to do that. So I am hoping they do cross that over if they turn him heel in NXT, which they should, and they probably will at Vengeance Day by having him cost Trick Williams the NXT Championship against Ilya Dragunov. He also turns heel on SmackDown, assuming he's still appearing on the Blue Brand at that point, unless they just want to get him on the show more, maybe not full time, but just to kind of introduce him to the audience, keep the momentum going, and then bring him on back for the draft coming out of WrestleMania. Very possible. But he had a match here with Austin Theory. He challenged Grayson Waller backstage. Waller said, I already wrestled tonight, which was funny because he didn't in the opener. So he took on Austin Theory instead. Nick Aldis making the match official. Really good match here. Unfortunately ending in an injury for both men. Pretty scary spot here. Austin Theory was doing his usual move off the top rope. I don't know what you would call it. But it kind of injured both men, actually. Austin Theory landing on his head, and a really bad landing on his head. And Carmelo Hayes was injured as well. They didn't say, Carmelo Hayes wins the match by, referee stoppage, whatever it might be. No, they just kind of were both laying there. The referee determined it's probably not wise for them to continue, and they called off the match. Which is crazy because they had obviously they didn't schedule this or plan this. This was very much real. They had a referee stoppage finish, a week and a half ago on Raw, when Giovanni Vinci got rocked with that kick by Kofi Kingston. And Kofi Kingston's a veteran. The shit happens. So it's more of a question to me. I'm curious. Hopefully they're okay, first and foremost. Second of all, I'm curious if this sort of stuff has happened a lot more than we know of in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And they didn't call off the match, which I would think that was probably the case. Like, for example, we know for a fact that Miz wrestled the rest of the WrestleMania main event in 2011 against John Cena with a fucking concussion when he got speared to ringside through the barricade. His head bounced off the mat or off the concrete or whatever, and he had a concussion for the rest of that match. Doesn't even remember winning that match against John Cena. In that case, first of all, safety comes first, obviously. But in that case, I could see them wanting to finish the match in some form or fashion, even if it's not anything great, because it's the WrestleMania main event. But there have been plenty of matches, I'm sure, on TV, on pay-per-view, on free TV, that don't really matter, that they could have ended the match if the person was hurt instead of doing the show must go on type mentality. I don't know if that was a Vince McMahon. I mean, the guy, Owen Hart, fucking died in 99 and the show still went on. So, I mean, if that happened today, the show would definitely be over. I can't imagine they would still move on with a pay-per-view if someone passed away in the ring. I mean, he didn't pass away right then and there. They found out after the fact. That's neither here nor there in this review. My point is, I just think it's interesting they've done the referee stoppage finish twice recently, and we haven't really seen this much at all in the last number of years in WWE, if really ever. So I'm glad, first of all. I don't really care about the finish of a match. They can always run it back another time. The finish of a match like this is far more important. I'd much rather see them do something like this than continue the match for another 5-10 minutes just because they were supposed to, or they need to have a certain person go over. Like, I know when Charlotte Flair got hurt, for example, a month ago, I was there for that one. She was obviously pretty seriously hurt because she's going to be out for another 9 months. She just had surgery on her ACL, MCL, meniscus, completely blew out everything in her knee, which sucks. But they moved forward with the match. They did finish the match, but it didn't really look good. And it was only like one move. She only had to lock in the figure 8 or whatever, and then Asuka rolled her up pretty lazily just so she didn't injure Charlotte anymore because she knew the seriousness of the situation because Asuka's a pro too. So, I mean, that was a circumstance where they didn't call off the match, but they probably knew they could bring it home immediately. I'm not really sure what the difference is between that and this. Maybe because this had a head injury and not, wasn't a knee injury. A knee injury, you might not be able to walk, but at least you can get pinned or pin someone else, whatever the case might be. I'm not exactly sure. But I thought that was nice that they stopped the match and they didn't continue on just because, the show must go on, pal. Like, it doesn't really matter. They can always run this back down the road. WWE did post an update on their website and on social media soon after saying they were both okay. Just had head, I forgot what the word was. Face contusions might have been the word that they used, the phrase that they used in their update on the situation. So they should be okay. Hopefully Carmelo can still go in the Dusty Classic match on Tuesday. I imagine he probably would. But there's a chance they might hold him off to make sure he's not further hurt or doesn't get further injured or whatever the case might be. We also found out on the show, I should mention this here, we had a backstage, not a backstage segment, but like a vignette type thing that we see in NXT sometimes, and we've seen on SmackDown as well from time to time in the last 6 months with Triple H in charge. But it was Tyler Bate and Butch getting a pint somewhere at a bar, and they were just discussing, what does our future look like? And Butch had mentioned, we had our time together, but I think it's time for both of us to move on in our different directions, which I would normally be in favor of, and maybe that's still where they're going with this. But like I said last week, I think Tyler Bates' best chance at success on the main roster, at least for right now, is teaming with Butch, teaming with Pete Dunne. I just feel like on his own, he's going to go the way of Cameron Grimes, where he pops up once in a while, but otherwise he's just a stepping stone for other talent that loses a majority of the time. He's not going to really get the spotlight on him much at all. And he deserves better than that. So putting him in a tag team first might make the most sense. But the real takeaway of this thing, because he had mentioned the Brawling Brutes are over, and Tyler Bates said, what about, this is our chance to really show the world what British Strong Style is all about. And you got to show the world what you're all about. Show me, or show the world what you showed me in Blackpool. And he's probably talking about their time on the independent scene, but I kind of took that to mean, and maybe this is what the intent was, talking about when they first faced off in WWE, in the WWE canon, so to speak, back at that UK tournament 7 years ago, which does not feel like 7 years ago. That makes me feel fucking old. But they had their first match in the finals of that initial inaugural UK title tournament in Blackpool. So maybe that's what he was referring to. I'm not sure. But he said, what name, in so many words, I'm paraphrasing here, what name do you want them to remember you by? What name do you want them to be calling you? Whatever he had said. And then the segment ends just with kind of the lingering shot on Butch's face. Doesn't say Pete Dunne, but you know that's where this is going, and thank fucking God. The man has been Butch for 2 years too long. Now, it's really just a name change. He's been Pete Dunne basically in every other way, aside from the music. But like the gear, the in-ring mannerisms, he's been Pete Dunne practically for the past year and a half, but just getting to hear the name Pete Dunne again is a nice change of pace. Hopefully giving him his music back from NXT. We'll never get the original music back done by CFO, which I think was far superior to the remixed version, but even the remixed version is better than... I mean, the Brawling Brutes music is good, but Brawling Brutes are dead. Time to move on, and we'll see what that means for Sheamus. I mean, Ridge Holland went to NXT for a short while, so It's going to be interesting to see what Sheamus does upon his return now that his buddies are gone. He has no stablemates. Sheamus should be on his own when he comes back, but it's going to be interesting to see, does he, confront Butch / Pete Dunne about this? Do they have a feud? Does he turn heel? Does Sheamus turn heel? Does he go to Raw instead? Does he not even come back at all? Does he let his contract lapse and go to AEW? I don't know. There's a lot of different scenarios that could play out here. But, I thought that was great. We'll see where that goes in the weeks ahead. So we get to our main event. Ultimately, Jimmy Uso and Solo Sikoa could not find a partner, so they had to go at it alone here. It started out as a 2-on-2 tag, which makes more sense, because when you give the babyfaces the advantage over the heels, you want to see the Bloodline get their comeuppance, because they always stand tall on the show, and in WWE in general. But doing it as a standard 3-on-2 tag would have been a bit lame, so they had them attack Orton from the entranceway, a lot like they did to Cameron Grimes to start the show. So this was pretty much, for 90% of the time, a standard 2-on-2 tag team match, with Knight and AJ teasing tension, seemingly not going to be able to coexist against Jimmy and Solo until Orton's music hit. He comes out, tags in. I guess it's legal. He wasn't there from the get-go, but it was always supposed to be. Nick Aldis did say if Jimmy and Solo could not find a partner, this would be a 3-on-2 handicap match. That's what it turned into. Orton tags in, hits the RKO, and picks up the victory. So your winners, Randy Orton, LA Knight, and AJ Styles. I thought they would all just implode afterward and brawl with each other like we saw a few weeks ago on SmackDown. That did not happen. They took their time dismantling the Bloodline, beating the crap out of Solo and Jimmy, hitting their finishers on all three men, on both men, all three men, hitting their finishers on the two Bloodline members, including putting Solo Sikoa through the commentary table at ringside, Shield style, with a powerbomb, which was cool. And they ended the show with that, with them standing tall. Now, we did find out on next week's show there's going to be a contract signing with Roman Reigns back on the show, AJ, Orton, Knight. That should be nice. Hopefully we get to hear from all four men and the contract signing isn't cut short. It's our obligatory Roman Reigns contract signing before his next championship defense, but I am looking forward to that. They announced a few other things I don't remember. Logan Paul and Owens did trade jabs on the show and pre-taped promos, which I thought was well done as well. Logan Paul said that he would sue Owens if he walked into their match at the Royal Rumble for the United States Championship with the cast on his arm, so that's the story they're telling there. Good stuff. I liked the show. It was not as strong as last week, but again, kind of felt like a filler show, but it had its fair share of solid stuff. I thought Bianca and Bayley, for the upteenth time anyway, was a good match. The Bloodline story throughout the show was well done. They got their comeuppance in the end. The babyface is standing tall this week, which I liked, unlike last week. Karrion Kross and AOP getting a new name for their faction. Carmelo Hayes making another appearance here in the blue brand. The referee stoppage finish was unfortunate, but at least they're okay. That's the important thing. And we might finally be getting Pete Dunne back. That's a top takeaway from the show for me. A big W from Triple H on SmackDown for this week. Thank you guys for checking out my review. I appreciate it. For January 12th, 2024. We'll be back next week with another SmackDown audio review, I believe, so keep an eye out for that. There will not be a SmackDown audio review on the Friday right before the Royal Rumble. I'll be in Tampa for that show, for that event, obviously, that weekend, so I probably won't even be watching the show live. I will review it at some point in written form, but no audio review that Saturday before the pay-per-view, before the Royal Rumble show itself. Until then, have an awesome one, folks. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.